So good evening, everybody. Glad you're here. So I'm going to take a lesson which Monk used to tell his musicians about tonight. So he said, learn the music and then forget it. So hopefully you learn something and then you'll hopefully maybe internalize it in a different way. Age when everything was faster, 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 where bebop was faster, right? He really represented something different. To really allow yourself, even with newness, even with innovation, to listen and to consider. And he was a determined man who always put individual first. And as Paul Bacon, who was one of his people who described him, said that his rhythm seemed almost separate. He moved from smoothness to intensity. And he really developed, not blowing up a system like the atomic age would teach, but he really taught to change something from within and move something from within. So he kept traditional forms, and he really changed them from within. He created what was called a new architecture for improvisational music. And that's really important. And he also suffered from what we call, as I said, bipolar disorder. So there was an invention, which I know we'll get into, of him as this weird high priest of bebop, right? And he'd sort of, a lot of people made that who he was, whereas he was just very true to himself, and if something wasn't interesting to him, he just didn't get into it.
You mentioned before about his image, what he would do on stage, and why he would do it. A lot of people considered him perhaps this mental illness, and they called him crazy. How did he use that to his advantage? Or perhaps gain agency with that public image and that myth?
When new people would come up, because he had such an incredible eye for talent. He would play with Sonny Rollins, then Sonny Rollins would go do his own thing. He'd play with John Coltrane would do his own thing, Art Blakey, similar. So there would be new musicians who'd come in, and rehearsal also took a long time, as we talked about before. So they'd rehearse on stage, which is true. And so it was very often that he wouldn't necessarily play the music for them, he'd dance it for them. And also in many cases, there was opportunities where they would just play the same song over and over and over again during the thing. And people put up with that, and people thought that was fine. There's a lot of stories about sort of how he did that, but I think he intentionally cultivated this thing of weirdness, or this thing of eccentricity, so he could really be who he needed to be, most of all with the people that he loved, which was his wife, Nellie, and this whole incredible group of musicians, this fraternity. Doesn't say that he wasn't difficult. He was difficult, however, I think it was an intentional use of that kind of thing. And there's the thing he said, it's not weird, is what he said. It's just weird because people don't know it yet. Randy Weston, who he played with a lot, called him this incredible force of strength. Lots of people called him a visionary, called him not a high priest of bop, because that was more commercially sort of the thing, but really considered him to be a visionary. So when you're in the presence of such a, if you will, prophetic presence, what do? You avert your eyes, or you don't know what to do. So if you can laugh, or if you can make fun of something, it makes you instantly feel more comfortable about things. And I think Monk knew that, and all of his notes were deliberate. There was no mistake, there was the chromaticism, there was no bad notes, right? A bass player of his once said, I've known pianists to play on the white keys and to play on the black keys, but Monk, man, he plays in between the keys. He knew people were getting an experience that transformed their life, so he intentionally allowed them to laugh at him in order for them to be able to take it better. Because if it was just full on, they'd have faces like from Raiders of the Lost Ark, man. They couldn't deal with it, right?
music still so accessible?
You're going to go from here, you're going to go ba-doo ba-da ba ba dee da. Yes? Right. Or straight note chaser or anything else, because he wrote these beautiful melodies. And he was all about the harmonics, but he essentially, I've got this, he said, if you know the melody, you make a better solo. It's all about the melody, even though this harmonic stuff that he was doing was incredibly maybe dissonant or maybe chromatic or maybe different from what you've known. But if you have a great melody, you can do anything. And I think he was really, really fond of great songs, whether they were Broadway songs or standards, if you will. He really loved them, and he didn't back down. When the new sound came out in the late 50s with Cecil Taylor's piano and Ornette Coleman's saxophone, you know, everyone finally realized and said to Monk, "Oh yeah, we're sorry for the 15 years that we thought that you were like the craziest person ever. It's Ornette Coleman." And Thelonious stood his ground, and he went back and he recorded standards, and he recorded in a very deliberate way of saying, this is who I am, and this is what I'm doing. So I think people really enjoy it, and I think it allows us, in my opinion, it allows us to be a better people because we can see the possibilities that are just in the regular melody of our life. And we can see that we can improvise, and we can see that if there's a, quote, a wrong note, we're still going to get through the piece. And he taught us all, I believe, to not be afraid to make mistakes. So I just want to tell one more very brief story. He was at the 5 spot, and everybody came to listen to him. And one day he left the bandstand, and he left the club, and one of the owners of the club, Joe Termini, went out and finally found him a couple blocks away. This is during the set, and he said that Thelonious was up just looking at the moon. And Joe, you know, he's got a set, he's got a thing, and he goes, "Thelonious, man, are you lost?" And Thelonious looked at him and he said, "I ain't lost. I'm here. The 5 spot is lost."